All right, welcome. Looks like I just realized I made a mistake and I set this stream up to be unlisted at first. So those of you who came in, I guess you got the email. Glad to see you here. Excited to get into it today because what I want to get into is talking about self-employment from a spiritual practice. And personally, this has been one of the most transformative topics in my own life because, I've worked for myself since like 2013 or so. And I always kind of saw this separation between my spiritual life and, working on the business kind of thing. But once I started to really synthesize these two inside my own head, everything got so much better. And what I'm going to be talking about is like the seven like key points. You can call them the 7 commandments of self-employment as a spiritual practice. And I think that if any of you, you work for yourself, or even you want to work for yourself, maybe you're getting a side hustle going, or maybe you've got a thriving business, I don't know. But when you implement these concepts that I'm going to share with you, it does a tremendous amount to just reduce your stress levels. I think it makes you far more successful, and just overall, like, take a lot of the pressure off of yourself when it comes to running your own business. Because when you're doing that, when you're the guy, especially if you got a family relying on you and your ability to perform, there's just a lot on your shoulders, and it can feel incredibly overwhelming because no one's telling you what to do. It all comes down to your performance, your decisions, your ability to execute. And when you're doing all of that without a strong spiritual grounding, then, it just mounts up very quickly, and it can turn something that you were once incredibly passionate about into something that just feels like a nightmare. So that's what we're going to be doing, talking about how we bring God into this, how we bring a deeper approach to entrepreneurialism. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. And the very first part, the very first commandment of spiritual entrepreneurialism is what I would say is, thou shalt prosper. Okay. And this was one of the things that, me coming from a more conservative Catholic upbringing, was something I struggled with. This idea of making money as a bad thing. And, there's kind of like this idea that the pursuit of money is sinful, is wrong. It's something that is not morally okay. And when you have any kind of beliefs around this, that like chasing money is bad, that making money is bad, that like optimizing for profit is something wrong, then you're going to really be hamstringing yourself. And I would say you're also going to hamstring your ability to do good in the world. Because if you're running a business and you've got multiple sort of obligations on your end, you got, at least from a moral perspective, okay? So like, on one hand, you want to provide good value to the people you serve, right? Like your customers, okay? Secondly, you got to take care of yourself and potentially even your own family. So you got to provide for them. And, if you want to do a good job at that, you got to make sure that you have enough money, right? But then there's also the effect of like the ripple of all this kind of thing. If you have a crappy, unprofitable business, or one that just has you running ragged, then the effects of that are going to be large, right? And they're going to be negative, right? You're going to have people who are unhappy. You're just like creating stress in their lives because the product that they spent money on isn't really serving them. They're not solving the problems in their life, right? And then also you're going to be stressed. You're going to be, unhappy. It's going to, not reflect well in your mental state, which then you're not going to be able to give to the people around you, right? Like when you're running a business that's not prospering, well then, it doesn't feel good. And it's very hard to show up as the person that you want to be for the people around you. And then finally, obviously your family, like they need to be able to, rely on you as the good provider. And so like realizing that, okay, I have to prosper, like, that's the goal. If you're in business and it's not to prosper, financially and to become abundant in that level, then I would say that you are denying your moral obligation, Now, you're not always going to be necessarily perfectly successful at this, but if you're not aiming for it and you're not actively working toward it, you're doing something wrong. And this might seem very obvious to some of you, but there's also going to be some of you out there who are like, no, this is a little bit difficult. And these are the people who always want to give away more and more and more. And I see this a lot, particularly in like new coaches or people with really with coaches or consultants and stuff. They're very afraid to charge what they're worth. And when they always want to give more and more away for free. And what I've found is that when people pay for something, if it's good, then you're doing them a favor, especially if it's like a good investment, because like a sizable investment, because it forces them to take their own decision seriously. So the goal should always be, in my opinion, to deliver, the aim is 10 times the amount of value that you charge for. So they feel like they're getting an awesome bargain. But even if you're getting a double amount or even just a significant percentage above, they feel like they're getting a good deal, then raise the price until it feels like, as long as that holds true, right? If you're completely changing someone's life with your coaching, well, then it might be worth quite a bit. And if you can look at it from this perspective of happy customers never regret their purchases, right? Like if they're happy, if they get what they want, then that's going to allow you to charge more, which is going to allow you to prosper, which is going to allow you to create this wonderful ripple effect for you, your employees, your customers, and your family. So hopefully that one's a bit of a no-brainer, but if you don't have that one in place, everything else is kind of screwed up. So this brings us to the next big point, which is one that took me a while to wrap my head around, but once I got it, it was like, oh, okay. This feels a lot better. Money should be a tool of God, not an idol of greed. All right. And this is one of these things where it kind of plays in with all this sort of stuff where it helps you step into that first perspective, where if you see money simply as a tool, well, then, it can let you do a lot of things, right? You can solve a lot of problems with money. You can make the world better with money by giving to causes and all of this kind of thing. Like if you got money, you've got the ability to be generous. But the key is you got to realize it's a tool. It's not an idol. And when you start going into this, always focusing on the bottom line, always trying to maximize your profit, always worrying about the bills and everything like that, then, it starts to shift the perspective on things, right? Because really money's just potential for change, if you think about it, because you can use money to make things happen. And if you just start using it as a scorecard, you start using it as a way that I can get more pleasure, which, it certainly is that, but it's not just that. You start losing that spiritual grounding, and the way that you're going to spend your money is going to get knocked off. And this leads into the third point, which is where I think this conversation starts getting very interesting, which is you in your business, there's this feeling like it's all on you, right? But it's not exactly, especially not when you're approaching self-employment from a spiritual perspective. Because the third point here is that you are the steward of your business, not the master. So what do I mean by this? Ultimately, if you adopt, a belief in God, then God is the master. You're just kind of in charge of this little line of destiny that God wants in the world. Maybe he speaks to you in your heart through a calling, or there's some kind of need, maybe you fall into it, but you're in this position where you either have or you can create this business that has the potential for creating all this ripple effect in terms of financial, lifestyle, change in the world, all this other kind of stuff, right? You're the steward of this, but it's ultimately God's thing, It's his business, right? And it's helpful if you, what I had to do at one point is I literally just said, all right, God, this is your business. Yeah, I'm going to be kind of managing things here on this earth, but this is yours. And personally, this felt like a huge weight off my shoulders, because when I started looking at my business like this, I realized that I wasn't the final, like the buck didn't really stop with me. You know, I was the second to the end in line. Like I was like the vice president rather than the president of it. You know, we're the penultimate person of responsibility. And when you start looking at it like this, it's really useful because there's so many intangibles that are required to make self-employment work. You can control a lot of them, but a lot of it is completely up to things outside of your control, i.e. God's domain, right? And so how do you orient yourself when you start looking at your business in this way? Well, what you got to see is, well, I got to control the things that I can control. That's it. And then the rest of it, I literally give it up to God. That's for the master. You know, I'm just the steward here. It's like, you know, certain things I'm not going to bother God with, because it's like, I know exactly what to do here. I know what I'm supposed to, like, what's moral, what's just, what's intelligent, etc. Yeah, I can handle that. I'm a good steward. But for the bigger things that are beyond my competence, beyond my control, give it up to him. It's his. You know, the money's his too. You know, looking at, you know, money as a tool of God, it's his money. So when you start looking at it, you start wrapping your head around business from this perspective, a really incredible thing happens. And that is you stop worrying. And in fact, for me, when I start to worry, I know what's going on is that I'm trying to become the master. I'm trying to make the money mine. I'm trying to make the business mine, and it's all on me. And what I do now is like, oh, no, this is God's, right? I am employed by the divine is the way that I look at it. And so like this has led me to so much more peace internally, because I know that even if things go up and down, whatever, like, you know, something's not working, I do what I can. But at the end of the day, the ultimate results are in God's hands. And that's like so fundamental, like spirituality, that like, you know, trust in God, you know, give it to him, that sort of thing. But it's one thing to say that and to hear that, you know, growing up or in your spiritual formation or whatever. But it's another thing to really practice it on a deep level. And what I found is that when I'm doing this, when I am in this alignment, when I am in this state where I'm showing up more as a steward, I can think so much more clearly. I can act with far less fear. I can act much more swiftly because I'm not worried about things being perfect. I just need to do literally my best, like, you know, within balancing time, leverage, you know, avoiding perfectionism, being rugged with it, trusting that I can always iterate, and etc. Got to follow those kind of principles. But as long as I do that, like the things that are meant to bear fruit that are good, they will. And the things that won't, well, they won't. And so this is like, it's kind of hard because it takes what is already difficult about entrepreneurialism to the next level. But if you can go to that next level, it's really worth it. And that is really abandoning this illusion of worldly security. Because when you work for yourself, like you already are kind of accepting that, all right, I'm not going to get this security of a, you know, regular paycheck, right? And a lot of people say that. They're like, oh yeah, I couldn't work for myself. Like I like security. Meanwhile, you know, people are getting fired and laid off constantly from, you know, whatever job that they're at. And so like, I don't really think that's even an accurate point, but because nothing's fully secure, whether you work for someone else or you work for yourself. But the difference is that like what entrepreneurs tend to face is that like when I stop working for the day, the problems don't stop being mine. Like if you're checking out of like an hourly job, well, you're off the clock. It's literally not your problem anymore. But when I started realizing that like, okay, hey, I'm the steward here, and like there are certain things outside of my control, it allowed me to actually mentally check out, for me to actually shift out of work mode. Without this, I would just constantly swirl and spiral in, my mind about, oh, I got this thing's still not figured out. I got to do this thing, etc. And that just wears you down. It grinds you down. It makes your decision making worse. It makes you, more anxious, moving out of fear rather than out of your vision, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's a big problem. So when you embrace this attitude of steward, of your business with God as the master, all that stuff really starts to go away. So let's move to our third point here. Okay. And the third big moral imperative of a business as a spiritual practice, fourth big moral imperative of business as a spiritual practice is that you should multiply what you are blessed with. That's it. You always want to be multiplying what you are blessed with. And so, like, we hear about this in the parable of the talents, right? If you read the Bible, it's like, there's this master and he gave 3 of his stewards or whatever some money, different amounts. The first 2, they grew it to some degree, but the third guy, he just kind of planted it in the ground because he didn't want to lose it. And that's the one who got, in trouble, right? Like, God doesn't like it when we waste the things that we give him. And so how does this apply? Well, obviously, if you've got talents, you've got abilities, well, you want to make good use of them. But where I've found this most interesting is when God doesn't give you exactly what you want, okay? And my belief is that you should view everything that you are given in your life as a blessing. Right? If you believe fully that God is good, that he's going to take care of you, that he's going to give you what you need, then sometimes the reality is you need challenges, you need setbacks, you need struggles, because these things can shape you. They can make you stronger. They can make you grow. Sometimes they can just force you to change direction away from something that you thought you wanted to something you actually want more. And for example, okay, say, you run some big new marketing campaign and it doesn't work out, right? Well, maybe God's saying, I don't want you to market like that. And so you got to multiply the insight. He's giving you something. How do I make it better? And always adopting this frame of if I'm not getting what I want, then I'm getting something even better. And it's your job to lean in to your faith in God and realize that, all right, I'm getting something good here. I just need to figure out how to use it. And a lot of times I got to learn. I got to come up with a new plan. I got to maybe shift directions. Maybe this one business totally went bankrupt. Okay, well, then that wasn't the business. Or maybe it's I got to do the same business in a different way. Look at it as a gift. And when you start doing that, it'll allow you to start finding clues for where you're supposed to go next. Right? You ask yourself, if God was giving this to me as a gift, what is he trying to communicate to me? And you're almost always going to be able to find something. And I'm not saying that you're going to be able to find it without some kind of struggle or some kind, I'm not going to say the answer always comes immediately. Sometimes you're going to have long periods where things are very difficult. But if you look at your life on the macro scale, all of your hardest sufferings and challenges, they all gave you something tremendous if you decided to grow from it, right? They gave you some kind of resilience, some kind of strength, some kind of insight into the world that you otherwise would not have had. And so this multiplying what you're blessed with, particularly when applied to setbacks and failures, is an absolute game changer. All right. So, always lean into this spiritual side of things when things don't seem to be going your way, and you're going to be able to find a blessing that you can then, turn into a positive multiplication. So that's that one. Now, on to the fifth point here. This is the idea that leverage equals prosperity. So if you study self-improvement stuff, got on that here. If you study self-improvement stuff or business growth stuff and whatever, you're going to regularly see all kinds of stuff about leverage, right? This idea of how do I get more for less? Like time leverage, like how can I get more done in less time? Or financial leverage, how can I get a higher ROI? How can I put less money in and get more profit out, right? And this one is very, very key, because what I've found is that there's a lot of guys who have what I might consider a solopreneurial selfishness. And this is something that I personally had for a long time. It's like, I just want to be a one-man show. I just want it to be me. I want it to be small, manageable, and I want to get all of the reward, all the profit. I don't want to worry about any of the other stuff. And that's it. Okay. It's just about me. I want to keep it small. And if we go back to that very first point of, you're supposed to prosper, doing things yourself really puts a cap on how much money you can make. Almost everyone, even like people you think of as solo acts, they have a lot of people usually working for them behind the scenes in terms of, assistants, consultants, etc. And when you start thinking about, all right, how can I actually generate the maximum level of prosperity, you have to include other people, okay? Because there's a limit to how much you by yourself can do. There's a limit to how much good in the world you can do. There's a limit to how much money you can make to do more good in the world. Okay. And if you're working all the time, obviously you're going to be able to, not going to be able to give yourself as much to your friends and your family and loved ones and community and that sort of thing as well. And so it's like at some point you have to share the burden, but also what you're doing is you're giving other people the opportunity to share in the rewards, right? Like when I started, hiring people to work for me, that was one of the things that kind of struck me as like, you know what, I'm not just praying and working for my own prosperity now. It's like, I want to be able to ultimately help all the people who work with me have, thriving careers, right? Like this is a very, very, I think altruistic thing. Like sometimes guys, they're like, oh, I want to start a business, but I don't know, I can't come up with anything that I feel like is really going to change the world. Well, some people aren't going to be doing like, breakthrough technology stuff that transforms society. Some people aren't going to be running businesses or, nonprofits that go and, feed starving people in Africa. Okay. But even if you're doing a super quote unquote mundane business, just like something basic that the world needs to get done, and you decide to take that on your shoulders, make a business out of it, when you are feeding other people's families, through the work that you do, you're helping them, you're giving them good employment, you're giving them, striving to give them, like treat them well, give them, proper, vacations, give them whatever. When you make that opportunity available, you are helping a lot of people, right? Even if it's just your employees and then the little, say it's even a silly service you provide to your customers, as long as you're taking care of your people who are working with you, you're going to be able to get more done, make more money, and create this bigger ripple effect, which is what we really want. So when I started looking at it from that perspective, like I always wanted to make a big impact in the world, and I always thought it was going to be from me to customer. But once I started realizing, all right, I got to scale, I got to get more people on board, I expanded that vision to also include the people who work with me, right? And so if you can look at that as like, I want everybody who works with me to prosper totally, not in an imbalanced way. You don't want to have a situation where it's a win-lose, where other people are profiting in your business, but you're not, because that's just feels like shit and it's not fair. But if you can really lean into that win-win perspective and you can bring more people into it, then you're just going to win more and more and more. That's really it, because then people are going to be working for you to win rather than against you. And this is what we see in like, in a lot of cutthroat corporate America is like people will screw each other over. They're very competitive. It's like if you win, then I lose. So I got to make you lose so I can win. And everyone's trying to tear each other down, when if you create this real synergistic win-win scenario, it's like, well, yeah, I want you to win, because the more you win, the more I win. And this goes with partnerships and everything. So I think that that's really, really important. And this is not to cast shade at anyone who wants to do solopreneur stuff. Some of you are called to that. Some of you are called to just, run your own little one-man show. But I would just, encourage you to think about, what if I did take this bigger? What if instead of just seeing like, training an assistant or bringing someone else in, it's like I'm losing money and I have to like train them, blah, 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 blah. Instead of seeing it like that, you gave yourself the opportunity to look at it as like, how can I make more good with the help of another person? Well, you might open up your mind a little bit. So that was number 5. Now on to number 6. And this one is kind of an odd one at first, but I think it's one that gets lost a lot in our grind culture today. And this is the idea that you are a human first and an entrepreneur second. And I think a lot of guys, like they'll have this thing when they start working for themselves, they become kind of like in their identity, whatever it is that they do. It's like, oh, I'm a coach, or I'm I'm the guy who runs this store, or I'm the guy who runs this online business or whatever. Like, this is who I am. And it's not. That's just what you do. That's your work. Okay. And work, don't get me wrong, it's an incredibly important part of life. I think particularly for men, like having a good way to make money that you feel aligned with, etc., is a fundamental key to thriving as a man. But that's not all you are. That's just your work. Okay. And your life's got to be in balance, because if not, then you might find yourself in the situation where you're successful at your work, but everything else sucks. I've seen so many guys who, maybe they make a ton of money, they've got an awesome business, but they're on their third marriage, their kids don't talk to them, and, their health is totally garbage, and they have literally no fun. They're just miserable, right? That's someone who forgot that they are a human. And yes, humans need to make money. They need to work. They need to have a sense of meaning in that field, but they also need other things, right? You need to get your family. Like, family is essential. Most of us, I would say almost all of us, we need friends. We need some kind of social cohesion, some kind of social connection that makes them feel like they have people that they like, and those people like them, and there's no blood obligation involved, right? Like, I like these people, and I get to share in the enjoyment of this life. And then you've got fun, right? Like, who wants to live their life entirely as a means to an end, right? Like, this is something I see with a lot of very ambitious guys. And like, I love the ambition, but they have this idea that if I just sacrifice and grind for X number of years, and I just abstain from all pleasure, and I just hustle, well, then someday I will magically arrive, and then I'll be able to enjoy my life. And the reality is, you can still be successful and enjoy the journey, right? Like, why wouldn't you try to do that if you could? I mean, like, some people are wired differently. Some people, that's all they want to do. Like, I'm not going to say Alex Hormozy is wrong because all he does is work. He might just be wired like that. But I do have an issue with him saying, like, that's the way to do it. That's the smart way. He's like, his whole thing's money. He seems very focused on money, which is, it's good. It's great. But for a lot of people, that's not all they care about. And so you have to be very clear in yourself, is that all you care about? Do you only care about the bottom line? Do you only care about the money in your bank accounts? Do you only care about your total net worth? Or do you also deeply value your family time, right? Like, one of the more eye-opening experiences I've ever done was putting a dollar amount on everything that I did throughout a week, right? It was part of like this, I think it was a Perry Marshall course about like improving your productivity and leverage and stuff like that. And the idea was to find, what are all the things that you're spending time on that aren't worth much? Like, from a business perspective, sometimes it's really crystal clear. Like, you can be like, oh, well, I spent, 3 hours this week making thumbnails. And in reality, that's like a $10 or $20, max per hour job that I could just pay someone else to do. It's like, is that really worth my time? Do I want to be a $10 per hour employee? No. But then you start applying it to your personal life too. It's like, well, how much is it worth to me to be able to, chill out and watch some shows with my wife? How much is it worth to me to be able to be fully present with my daughter and run around and go do fun stuff with her? Or even just always be there in the morning and then tuck her in at night, right? Like, these things have a significant dollar amount to me, right? And being clear on that is going to help you understand how your specific humanity is shaped, okay? Because they value different things, but you have to honor it. You have to understand what it is, because otherwise you're going to be working against the way God designed you, all right? And God designed you to be a human, right? Actually, he tells you your job is to become like a child, right? And I think about how my daughter behaves. Like, she's not just living for one thing. She wants it all, right? She wants to do good in school. She wants to, have her little dance parties. She likes to enjoy her stuffed animals. She wants to have time with her daddy, right? She wants to do it all. And I think we humans, we got to realize that there's got to be a balance that's got to be struck here. And when you force your business to operate within the context of your humanity, you might think, oh, well, that's limiting. I could get so much more done if I didn't do that. If I just became an entrepreneurial robot, I would be able to succeed so much better. That's not really what I found. I found that when you force your business to operate within your humanity, it puts you in this position where you have to find that leverage, right? It's like maybe if you work 80 hours a week, you could be that solopreneur. But if you say, no, I'm only going to work 30 hours a week, well, then in that case, I got to learn how to scale a little bit. I got to learn how to delegate. I got to bring someone else in on this. And you actually find that you might actually get a lot more out of your work time because you're more recharged. It heals burnout, really. Like one of the big mistakes guys make is thinking that their peak productivity and what their sustained productivity are the same thing, which is insane. If we just put it in the context of, okay, take your max speed when running a 40-yard dash versus your max speed when running 3 miles. They're wildly different, right? And so business is something that's a long-term thing, right? It can take, several years to really build it up. And so it's like, what's the pace that you could maintain over several years? Chances are it's much lower than your grind ego is comfortable admitting. And chances are you probably needed a lot more fun, a lot more downtime, a lot more rest, a lot more connection than you think in order for you to show up at work each day functioning with a clear head and high energy, because you're just going to get a lot more done when you're in a good state and you're going to enjoy the process. And that's part of life. Got some cool stuff in chat here. I'll respond to it at the end. And so next point here. I got to move my notes. All right. This one, I think, if you have any sort of spiritual belief already and you might be neglecting it, then I really want you to listen to this one, because I firmly believe that God is the ultimate performance enhancer. Okay. And having a spiritual practice is going to do an infinite amount more for you than just like joining the 5 a.m. club or installing an ice bath into your house. Okay. Like all of those hacks, I'm not saying they're bad, but like that's not going to do anything for you compared to what staying spiritually connected to God will. Because let's break it down like this. All right. If you go back and you look at the areas in your life where you saw the greatest amount of success, okay? And I want you to think about, in that success, how much of it was because of your hard work versus luck, aka grace, okay? And if you go back and you look at that, you're going to find that there is a lot of things that were in the right place at the right time that you did nothing to influence. Really. I mean, for me, a lot of it, the whole reason I took off initially on YouTube and was able to build a coaching business like almost overnight was because I managed to tap into quitting porn and talking about it on YouTube at the right time. No one else was talking about it. It was kind of like a novel concept that was really kind of just at that point moving into the mainstream narrative. And I can look back at many points in my life where, high paying clients, they came in out of nowhere. I did literally almost nothing to get them. Yeah, I showed up each day. I did some things like that paved the way, right? I did my steward work of doing what was in front of me and trying to be consistent with it. But the big breakthroughs, they came out of nowhere. They came out of left field. And so even if you were to look at a lot of the most successful people in the world today, okay, you could not reproduce their success by just following the steps they followed, right? Like they uniquely took off in the time that they were in, right? They just happened to have the right set of attributes, the right set of work ethic, and, the right opportunities in front of them. And it all just went like that. Okay. And so the reason why staying spiritually connected is so important is because I believe this is the only way to widen that channel of luck or grace. Because when you're spiritually plugged in, you're more likely to notice things. You're more likely to see opportunities clearly. You're more likely to take a chance on something that maybe your rational, intellectual mind might even say is a bit of a silly idea. Okay. And so like, I believe, very strongly in listening to your gut, listening to your heart on things. If something doesn't quite feel right, I really try not to do it, because that's the closest thing I think we have to tapping into the deeper patterns in reality. If you want to take this out of a spiritual context and put it in just a psychological one, the intuitive mind is able to process far more information far more quickly than our logical conscious mind. Okay. And I literally experience this every single day firsthand when I'm coaching people, because like when I'm coaching someone, I'm not consciously thinking about exactly what I'm going to say to them, right? I'm kind of in the flow, in the vibe, and I work with whatever pops out of me. And a lot of times I can go back and I can make a logical explanation as to, why I did that in the moment, but I didn't actually do it in the moment. I was processing like a ton of different variables about what I'm hearing this person say, what I know about them, how they're like responding, what's their body language on the webcam. Like all of these things are processing beneath the surface that bring me to, the questions that give them great coaching breakthroughs and that sort of stuff. And so when we're tapping into the spiritual realm, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to tap into this deeper sense of knowing where our brain is processing stuff on a far greater scale than we can consciously hold, right? Like our conscious mind, the RAM memory, the random access memory in our mind, kind of like a computer, is very small compared to like what's going on in the background circuitry. And so when you keep yourself connected to God, like you're making sure that your morals are in alignment, you're making sure that your priorities are clear, and you got the most important things at the top and the less important things down below. You got your heart in the right place. When you intentionally set time aside to tap into that, to let go of the worry and all of these kinds of things, you create the environment within your psyche for, I would say, maximal intuitive breakthrough. All right. And then obviously, if you've got a good relationship with God and you believe that matters and that can have a tangible effect in the world, well, then, I don't know how you could avoid being blessed more from that. Okay. So those are the big points that I wanted to share with you guys today. And hopefully you found this useful. And if you got any questions or thoughts about any of this, would love to hear it in the chat. So let me see what you guys have said so far. Snow Metal says, love your perspective so far. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Voina says, like that you live stream. Good. I'm enjoying it too. It's fun doing it with a live audience. It just makes it easier to get into a flow. Lassa says, seeing the ups and downs as a game and a gift seems like it can shift your energy from flight to fight. 100%. I would say it actually takes it out of fight or flight and puts it more into play, right? And that speaks more to what you're saying, like seeing ups and downs as a game, because it is. Like, especially if you realize, all right, I'm the steward here, God's going to handle the heavy stuff. I'm here to play, right? I'm here to play a game, and, I'm here to score points, right? I want to win the game. I want to win this game of business, but I can have fun with it because I don't need to really worry about anything too dire being on the line, because I trust that God's going to take care of me. And believe me, I've seen some really insanely dark lows in my life. And no matter how low I got, things always turned around. Things always got better. And I believe that God always will do that as long as we, reach out to and grasp whatever sort of grace that he shows us. And I'm not to say tragedy and deep pain doesn't exist. It absolutely does. But it can transform you, and you can grow from it, and you can heal from it. So like you do that enough. It's hard to do that before you have the super low lows because you're afraid of them. But, that's why I think sometimes the worst lows are actually the biggest blessings, because those are the ones that set you free. It's like, shit, if I could get through that and I can be okay, if I can grow from that, if that could actually lead to something better in my life, then I'm not afraid of anything anymore, right? And that's real freedom. And I think guys with an entrepreneurial spirit, we crave that freedom, right? Layman says, solo work is simple, but you can't do things bigger than yourself without others. Yep. He says he does. I do computer stuff. I multiply productivity. It's made to be a team trade, and I love that about it. Yeah, that's cool. There's so much opportunity in the technology space. There's part of me that feels like, it's kind of like this imbalanced sort of thing where it's only, this people in this top echelons of society. I heard someone say, I think it was Joe Rogan, that if you're making $34,000 a year in the United States, you're in the top 1% of the world in terms of wealth. And so it's like, all right, if I'm making products for people, in the Western world, is that like, how good is that? Well, I think technology, it spreads, right? And it makes things easier for everyone when it reaches them. So technology is very, very cool. I think there's a lot to that, and AI is going to completely change the game. Once you guys can download your own little Mark Queppet coach as an AI assistant, that'll be fantastic. We're actually working on some ideas of how we can start implementing something like that. Yeah, Layman, definitely do start, delegating some stuff. Like you can get assistance from, and that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you can pay someone a cheap amount to you that gives them a great quality of living somewhere overseas, I think that's great. I think that's awesome. Why not? He also says, I think our effort and planning creates the landing zone for luck. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like if you go back to that steward and master analogy, it's like if you're an assistant to someone, like a high level CEO, your job is to make their job easier, give them more power. You're giving them leverage. And that's what I see being a business owner in today's world is, from a spiritual perspective, is like you're trying to be the widest and most effective channel for grace to flow through, because God decided that he wants to do a lot of the work in this world through people. And so we want to be one of those people that's like an incredibly useful asset to him, that like amplifies his goodness. So yeah, us creating that, the plan, the good habits, the consistency, all that kind of stuff. It's just opportunity for those big hits of breakthrough and grace to come through most powerfully. Nice, Carlos. I'm glad you found that useful. Snow and Mel says, leverage what you are blessed with, therefore stick to what you are best at. Generally speaking, I would say yes. There's kind of two things you want to be balancing here. I'll back you up to before I started working for myself, I was like graduating college with a computer science degree, and I hated computer science. Well, it's not that I hated computer science. I just didn't want to do it, right? And I wasn't particularly good at it. And I was like, okay, well, how am I going to figure out what I'm going to do with my life? And I was like, all right, I want to make the biggest positive impact possible. That's what I decided. And in order to do that, I realized, okay, well, I got to make the best use of my talents, right? And then I learned another piece that you have to consider too, which is, what talents do I have? And then what do I actually resonate with doing? Because those two are important. You can be really good at something that you do not like doing. And that's a problem, because even if you're doing good work, you're doing it excellently. If you do not like it, well, then That's going to automatically probably bring down the quality of your work, and it's going to remove your desire and drive to scale and amplify it. And it could potentially even just burn you out and make you quit it, right? So we got to find this intersection point between like our ability and what we resonate with. And we can't be like too precious with this, right? Like, because especially if you're, like there's always gonna be stuff you don't want to do. So we have to figure out like at what level of internal resistance do we just say no to something, right? It can't be too finicky with it, where if it's, just a little bit, I'm not going to do anything uncomfortable. Well, you're not going to do anything. Okay. You're not going to get anything done. But if you, also have this mentality of like, I'll do anything no matter what, even if I hate it. Well, then you actually lose your ability to make good decisions, because there's a million different ways to achieve success or to build a business, whatever. And you need to have a way to filter those potential pathways. And without taking personal preference into account, it becomes almost impossible to navigate all the hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions you need to make while running a business. So when I'm trying to, make a decision on something, it's like, am I going to do my social media this way or that way? Am I going to make this product or that product? Am I going to work with this target audience or this target audience? I got to see, where is this intersection point between what logically sounds right and emotionally feels good. And when you start filtering your options between that intersection point of logic and emotional alignment, then it's going to automatically remove a bunch of things. Like the things that just logically make sense, but you're like, goes clunk inside of you. You just take those off the table. All those things that sound really exciting, but logically it's like, that's probably not going to lead anywhere good. Those are all off the table. Now you have a much smaller set of things to choose from, and that makes decisions much easier. And chances are you can just find the one with the highest resonance, the highest alignment between those two things, and then boom, you're able to roll. So resonance, yeah. Lemon says, thank you, Mark. This is good. We need more godly men leading these parts of the world and being more free to follow God as he calls us. Thank you, man. I'm glad this clicked with you. I think that, like I was saying in the beginning, like the entrepreneurial guy is unique because he's really got uncapped potential. Technically, God can turn anyone into like the butterfly effect that like changes the world, right? Like there's a lot of examples throughout Christian history and other traditions too of like, monks who have taken the vow of celibacy and poverty. They can, transform entire regions, sometimes even, more than that. So anyone can have a massive impact. I don't want to take that away. But when it comes to the problems that we face in the world today, so many of them are resource-based and opportunity-based. So if you're in a position where you can build a business and you want to build a business, like that's a calling there. That's a calling to do something important and good, because the more people you can bring under your sphere of influence, under your umbrella of like righteous governance in a lot of ways, because like if you're running a business, kind of what you're doing is you're running like a small city state and you can make that prosper, then you're doing something very, very important. Lemon says, I think the more self-reliant and more risk-tolerant I am, the less I feel like dragging my feet when God calls me to do something. Yeah. I think that's true. And like that risk tolerance, it's so intrinsically tied to your ability to trust in God. Because if you believe that like, you've always got a safety net with God, if you really believe that, then yeah, that's going to be the number one thing, right? Like that's going to be the thing that allows you to move rapidly and quickly. That's the key to ruggedness. That's the key to speed, is not frickin' second guessing yourself constantly, right? And this is like an art form that really develops over time, and where it's like, can I identify what's directionally correct? Can I just do that and just start that? Pick a small target that's directionally correct? Can I just get that done without hemming and hawing, get some more feedback, see how it goes, and then go again, right? Stop trying to make it all perfect. Stop making everything such a big deal. Trust that God's going to work out the details, and you can take off like a rocket. Yeah. So, all right, guys, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about here today. This Monday, I'm going to be running a cohort specifically for entrepreneurs, taking them through the Frontline Man program. If you guys are on the email list, then make sure you sign up. I would love to have you in it if you got a business, because I think that our operating system that we teach, like the Frontline framework, is like the key to high leverage performance. It's like the thing that's going to allow you to line all this stuff up that I'm talking about using really just a simple, repeatable formula that takes 5 to 10 minutes to do every day. That's it. I see it as like the one task work day. It's like you put yourself in order using our approach, then everything else just kind of runs along smoothly. And I developed it because I was going crazy working for myself. I was going crazy trying to manage my performance, feeling all this pressure, feeling constantly overworked, constantly burned out, constantly feeling like I was failing, etc. And, I initially was, developed to help guys, just in general, but I'm starting to see that entrepreneurs, they probably need this the most, especially the ones with families, because they got all that other extra pressure and, priorities pulling them in different directions. You need a way to get yourself focused, organized, and mentally on point so that you're doing the most important things. You're able to unplug at the end of your workday. You feel good. You're making progress and all that kind of stuff. And so you could also click the link in the description if you want access to this. You do have to book your call by tomorrow though. So if you click the link, it'll take you to a training, and then from that training, you can say book a call, but try and do it soon if you want to get into this entrepreneurial cohort. I think that it's going to be fantastic, and I'm really excited to work with you guys on it. So, all right, thanks so much for being here. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Ooyap.